He saved her from bandits, unaware she was the West's wealthiest baroness. Snow came early that year, soft as a prayer, blanketing the dry, broken land like grace laid over scars. It whispered across the Emerald Ranch, settling in the cracks of the abandoned stable and gathering on the wind-worn cross behind the house. There, beneath the bent cottonwood, Elijah Carter drove his spade into the earth, breaking the frozen crust with a patient rhythm of a man who no longer feared silence. He was burying the last full-born of his wife's mare, a colt too small to last the winter. It wasn't the first grave he dug with shaking hands, nor the one that broke him most. But it marked something, an ending perhaps, or maybe a final surrender. Elijah paused, leaning on the shovel. The cold breathed into the seams of his coat. His shoulders, broad but bowed, didn't rise with effort anymore. They merely endured. The wind combed through his dark hair, streaked early with silver, and the hollow beneath his eyes had deepened since the autumn rains failed to come. He placed a small cedar carving, a crude horse, smoothed by his thumb, on the mound. He'd once carved toys like that for children that never came. Now he carved them for graves. Beyond the hill, a hawk turned lazy circles. The land rolled quiet, solemn. No one else had lived out this far since the mine closed and the water line shifted. Just Elijah and the memories. He didn't curse them. He simply let them sit. By mid-morning, he'd saddled his mule and loaded a sack of oats across its back. The path to town had turned treacherous with ice and dust, but he'd promised Old Man Turner to trade feed for lamp oil. Promises, even small ones, still held weight in Elijah's world. He rode slow, watching the ridgeline. His rifle was slung loose across his back, not from fear, but habit. Trouble didn't always come in thunder and hooves. Sometimes it crept like sickness, quiet and waiting. At Saltbone Ridge, where the shale split and the wind howled like something remembering its name, he spotted smoke. Thin, pale, wrong. Not the kind a homestead stove made, but the kind that meant ruin. Elijah narrowed his eyes. The ridge bent the land into strange shapes, but he could make out a wagon overturned near a scatter of rock. Horses gone. Wheels splintered. He clicked his tongue, and the mule edged forward, hesitant. The first thing he saw clearly was blood. Not pooled, but smeared in frantic strokes. Then a body, small, too still. A child, maybe 10, hair matted dark against the snow. His breath caught in his throat, not from fear, but from the weight of too many endings. Near the wreck, crouched behind what remained of the wagon bench, was a woman. She didn't move as he approached. Her hands were bloodied, knotted in the wool of her skirt. A shawl hung torn from one shoulder. Her face, streaked with dirt and ash, bore a red mark blooming at the temple. Her eyes, wide and wild, locked on him without recognition. He dismounted slowly, boots crunching frost. He didn't speak yet, not because he had nothing to say, but because some silences were sacred. From behind the rocks, a voice snarled, "Drop the rifle." Elijah turned just enough to see the movement. 2 men, no badges, no dust on their boots, bandits or worse. One grinned with yellow teeth, the other held a long knife. Neither looked like the type to leave witnesses. But Elijah wasn't a fast man. He was a steady one. The rifle came up like it had been born in his hands. 2 shots cracked through the hush. Clean. Immediate. One man fell before he knew he'd been hit. The other ran, bleeding, limping, vanishing into the curve of the land. Elijah didn't chase. He never chased. If death wanted more, it would circle back. The woman hadn't flinched. She blinked slow, breath heaving shallow and uneven. He stepped toward her, uncertain if she'd faint or strike. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her gaze fell to the child. A girl by the look. Elijah knelt beside her, cold, gone. He bowed his head, then stood without speaking. "We need to ride," he said, voice low and rough with disuse. The woman didn't argue. He helped her mount, though she trembled against him, and tucked her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Her hair smelled faintly of lilac and smoke. Odd in this country. Odd anywhere this far from civilization. She didn't ask who he was or where they were going. Maybe she already knew that wherever it was better than here. They rode through falling snow, the sky heavy with ash-colored clouds. The mule's hooves left soft imprints beside the trail, filling in moments after they passed. As the sun began its quiet descent, they reached the sagging fence of Elijah's land. The gate hung loose on rusted hinges. She looked around as he led her through. At the bare corral, the single chimney spilling thin smoke, the barn half swallowed by time. He helped her down. Her legs buckled once, and he caught her. For a moment, her face pressed against his chest. She stiffened, then pulled away. Inside, the cabin was warm in the way old things are, through memory more than heat. A fire crackled, small but honest. The room bore signs of a woman once present, quilts, worn lace curtains, a pressed flower in a frame above the mantel. Dust had settled on most of it. Elijah guided her to the rocker. She sat, arms folded around herself, not from cold, but something deeper. He found a clean cloth, dabbed at the wound on her temple. She didn't wince. Her skin, though pale with shock, held an elegance he didn't expect. She was no ordinary settler. That much was clear. Still, he didn't ask. She didn't speak until he brought her a cup of broth. "Thank you," she murmured, voice brittle as winter glass. He nodded once and set a second cup beside her, then sat across the fire. Outside, the wind howled again. A coyote cried from far off, long and mournful. Elijah leaned back, eyes half closed. "You alone out here?" she asked after a time. "Mostly." Silence again, this time shared. "I had a name," she said quietly, like it was a thing long buried. "Once." He met her eyes. "Still do." She stared into the flames. The light kissed her features, cheekbones high and proud, lips dry but soft. She looked worn, but not broken. Not yet. He didn't press. Names would come when they were ready. Night deepened. The fire dimmed. She drifted to sleep in the chair, arms folded tight. Elijah pulled a blanket over her and paused, watching her face. There was something in the way she curled inward, as if bracing against the world's next blow. He recognized it, had lived in it. He turned away, toward the cold window. Snow still fell. The land would be whiter come morning, cleaner, if not kinder. Behind him, the rocker creaked gently. The only sound in a house that had not known life for too long. He whispered to the dark, not expecting an answer. "Let her stay, if she needs." Then he added, softer still, "And let me want her too." The wind whispered nothing back. But the fire burned on. Morning arrived slow, washing the plains in a thin milk-colored light that barely warmed the frost-furred windows of Elijah's cabin. The snow had stopped sometime in the night, leaving the world still and shivering. Inside, the fire had burned low, but hadn't gone out. The woman was still in the rocker, curled like a child in sleep too deep to fake. Her hands, folded beneath her chin, trembled only once before settling again. Elijah moved quiet, stoking the coals and adding a log with the reverence of a priest tending a flame. He didn't wake her. Let her rest as long as her spirit allowed. Outside, the mule brayed once. The wind had softened. He stepped out briefly, boots crunching into ice, fed the mule from the dwindling oat sack, then returned before the chill could stiffen his joints. When she stirred, the light had shifted. She blinked up at the beams above her as though unfamiliar with ceilings. Her eyes were the color of overripe plums, deep, rich, rimmed with sleeplessness. He stood in the corner, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups, and saw the flicker of tension ripple through her like the tail of a frightened doe. "You're safe," he said. Not a promise, just a plain offering. She sat up slowly, brushing at her hair with fingers that trembled less than he expected. "Where?" "My cabin, 8 miles north of Saltbone Ridge." Her gaze tracked the room, bare shelves, cast-iron stove, a bed against the far wall, tidy but unshared. A pair of boots tucked beside it. A single framed photograph on the mantel. A woman with a mischievous smile caught mid-laugh. Elijah handed her the coffee. "No sugar. Haven't had the trade for it." She accepted it without thanks, though not from rudeness. She was measuring him still. The way she held the cup, 2 hands, eyes never dropping. It was a stance born of careful living. "You live alone," she said. He nodded, sitting across from her in a chair made more of nails than wood. 3 winters now. She didn't ask what happened. He didn't offer. Her fingers tightened on the cup. "The child? Gone before I found her." He watched her carefully. "You knew her?" A pause. "She was the maid's daughter. They came with me." "Where were you headed?" Her jaw flexed once. "Someplace safer." That was all she gave. And he didn't need more. He'd seen enough in her eyes when he lifted her from the wagon wreck. Something that spoke of wealth worn thin and horror worn recent. She stood a little too fast. The room spun her once before she steadied on the table's edge. Elijah moved to help, but she raised a hand without looking. "I'm all right." He didn't argue. Instead, he ladled out a bit of porridge from the pot he'd stirred that morning, thick with dried apples and a single pinch of cinnamon, saved from last fall's barter with the preacher's wife. She sat again and ate slowly, chewing with that quiet desperation of someone not sure when the next meal would come. "You got a name?" he asked finally. She looked up, startled, as though he'd asked something far more intimate. "Clara," she said, after a beat too long. No surname, but it settled well in the air, like something true even if incomplete. "Elijah," he returned. Their eyes met not for long, but long enough for something to pass between them. Recognition not of pasts, but of burdens carried alone too long. That day passed like thawing ice, slow and without direction. Clara drifted through the cabin like smoke. She touched little, spoke less, watched the snow out the window with a stare that belonged to someone who'd once looked down from balconies, not across open plains. Elijah busied himself with mending. His coat had frayed at the elbow, and the barn door needed another nail or 3. He moved about his work without explanation, letting the rhythm of ordinary tasks act as invitation. She watched him fix a hinge with the kind of concentration reserved for puzzles and ghosts. "You do everything yourself?" she asked that afternoon, voice hushed. He glanced at her. "Who else would?" She hesitated, then offered, "In the city, we pay for every kindness." He raised a brow. "Doesn't sound kind, then." Clara didn't smile, but a flicker of amusement passed through her features like the sun brushing over water. Later, she asked if he had thread and needle. When he returned with both, she took his torn work shirt and began stitching at the table without comment. Her hands moved with quiet confidence, not quick, but practiced. Not settler's hands. Her fingers bore no calluses. Her nails trimmed fine. He watched her from the corner, saying nothing. In the evening, Ruthie May arrived. The midwife made her visits once a week, more out of habit than necessity. Elijah met her on the porch. "You all right?" she asked, squinting past him. "Heard shots, folk talking. Figured you'd be dead or married." Elijah's mouth twitched. "Neither." She nudged past him, her bulk wrapped in wool, eyes sharp. Clara rose politely as Ruthie entered. Something in the older woman's gaze narrowed. "Well," Ruthie said, offering a hand. "Ain't you a picture?" Clara hesitated, then shook it. Ruthie May, local gossip and unpaid physician. "I can tell fever from fakery in 2 minutes flat." Clara inclined her head. Clara. Just Clara. Ruthie's eyes dropped to Clara's boots. Expensive leather, though scuffed. Then to her wrists, no rings, but a mark where one had been. She said nothing, but Elijah knew she'd stored it all away. They spoke in half sentences. Ruthie asked questions Clara answered vaguely, and Elijah hovered just close enough to step in if needed. But Clara held her own, if warily. After Ruthie left, promising to return with more salve and a loaf of honey bread, Clara stood by the window, arms crossed. She knows. Elijah didn't deny it. She won't tell. Clara exhaled, long and quiet. Why not? Same reason I won't. We don't need stories to offer shelter. She looked at him, then really looked. And for the first time since she arrived, her expression softened not from fear, but from something closer to peace. That night, she cleared the dishes without being asked. He watched her stack the tin bowls neatly, her movements still too precise for someone born into rough living. Yet she belonged there in that quiet moment. as though the cabin had always held a space waiting just her size. As he banked the fire, she stood behind him. "You had a wife," she said, not a question. He nodded, slow. "She was kind," he said. "Braver than me." Clara rested her hands on the back of the rocker, eyes low. "Mine died too," she murmured, then caught herself. A pause. "I mean someone I loved. Not a husband. But near enough." Grief didn't always come with clear titles. They didn't speak again for a while. The silence stretched long but easy. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the porch eaves. Clara moved first, settling back into the rocker, blanket draped over her knees. Elijah sat across from her. Between them, the fire danced soft gold over the floorboards. "You planning to stay?" he asked finally. Clara stared at the flames. Her fingers knotted in the wool. "I don't know." He nodded once, accepting it. But when she turned her head to him, there was something behind her eyes. Not fear this time, but longing. Not for safety, for rest. "If I do," she said slowly, "would that be all right?" The words held weight, like they'd cost her something to say. He met her gaze, steady and calm. "Yes," he said, "it would." She turned back to the fire, and a quiet smile ghosted her lips. Outside, the wind fell still. The world waited. Inside, two souls, worn thin by loss and silence, sat across a flickering fire. Unspoken trust beginning to bloom where sorrow once took root. The night deepened. But for the first time in years, Elijah didn't dread the morning. Rain came like a whisper at first, soft, scattered taps against the window pane, then grew into a steady rhythm that coated the cabin in a hushed sort of calm. The kind of rain that blurred the edges of the world and turned everything into memory. Inside, the fire glowed low and steady. A stew simmered gently on the stove, its scent curling around the room like comfort. Clara sat cross-legged on the rug, elbows on her knees, watching the flames. Her hair, still damp from the walk to the well, clung to the nape of her neck. Elijah moved around the room in quiet circles, stirring the pot, checking the latch on the door, glancing at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. She always noticed. He'd begun to read her silence the way farmers read clouds, shades of storm or stillness, signs of a shift. And this evening, she was more still than storm, not withdrawn, but folded into herself, as if preparing to speak a truth she hadn't shaped into words yet. The light flickered across her face, catching the slope of her cheekbone and the shadow beneath her eyes. She looked tired in a way that ran deeper than lack of sleep. Tired of pretending, perhaps. Tired of hiding. "Would you mind," she said, finally, voice low, "if I asked about her?" Elijah didn't flinch. He pulled out the chair across from her, sank into it with a weight that made the old wood creak. His elbows rested on his thighs, hands laced. The rain ticked on. She was 24, he said. Laughed like it was a rebellion. Grew up east near Missouri. Came west for the wild air. Clara listened without interrupting, gaze steady, hands folded in her lap. "Couldn't cook worth a damn," Elijah added, a ghost of a smile brushing his lips. "But she could rope a calf faster than me, and wasn't shy about reminding me." He paused, his eyes distant. Lost her with the second child. The babe didn't last a day. There was no pity in Clara's face, just the kind of listening that felt like presence, not intrusion. "I kept the ring," he said. "Don't wear it, but it's in the drawer." Clara didn't speak right away. When she did, her voice barely rose above the crackle of firewood. "I lost someone too. Not to death, but to greed, to cruelty." She unfolded slowly, as if each word required its own breath. "My name isn't just Clara. It's Clara Wexley Monroe." Elijah didn't blink, but the shift in the room was felt. The way her posture stiffened, the way she avoided his eyes, she expected disbelief, or worse, disgust. "I was born into a title, a fortune. The kind most folk think buys safety. But it doesn't buy love, doesn't buy truth. Just hides what's rotten under velvet and lace." Elijah waited, still a stone, but warmer somehow. "I was promised to a man I didn't choose. A railroad baron, older, brutal. He wanted my inheritance more than me. When I refused, he came for it anyway. Legally, politically, violently. Her fingers twisted in her lap. I fled with my maid and her daughter, disguised as settlers, headed for a safe ranch in Kansas. They found us before we crossed the ridge. Hired men. Guns. They killed the maid. The girl died in my arms. Her voice broke, and she covered her mouth as though the grief was something to be hidden, not released. Elijah stood, stepped quietly into the kitchen, poured water into a mug, and placed it beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just sat back down and waited. Clara breathed in deep. I don't know what I am anymore, she said. Not a lady, not a wife, not even a proper fugitive. Just a name people chase, and a face they post in saloons for reward. They won't find you here, Elijah said. She looked at him, tears tracing down her cheeks without drama. But what am I to you? A burden? A stranger with stories too heavy to carry? You're a woman who survived, he answered simply. That's worth more than any title. Clara closed her eyes. The rain softened again, as if in response. She stayed by the fire long after the stew was eaten, her knees tucked under her chin. Elijah didn't press her to move. He went about washing the tin dishes, the rhythm of his movements as steady as his presence. It was a kind of gentleness she hadn't known existed, a man whose silence offered safety, not judgment. Later that night, she wandered outside. The air smelled of damp soil and cedar smoke. Elijah followed a few minutes after, standing beside her on the porch. She didn't shrink from him, nor lean in, just stood, shoulder to shoulder, watching the mist rise off the fields. I forgot what silence without fear feels like, she said. He looked at her, saw not the Baroness or the runaway, but the woman standing barefoot on the wet porch, robe clutched to her frame, face lit soft by starlight. Then maybe this place can help you remember, he said. They stayed there, not talking, not needing to. The wind moved gently through the trees, and somewhere far off, a nightbird called. The days that followed moved slow and quiet. Clara took to feeding the chickens. She swept the floors without being asked, cooked a meal or two, burned the beans once and laughed softly at herself, the sound catching Elijah, so off guard he dropped the fork he was holding. He started humming again, sometimes while repairing the gate or working the saddle leather. One evening, she asked him about the tune. He told her it was a lullaby his mother sang. She asked him to teach it to her. He didn't, but the next morning she was humming it under her breath as she chopped onions. Small things changed. Her shawl began to smell of wood smoke instead of fear. She no longer flinched when he opened the door without warning. She laughed twice in one day. Elijah started adding a second coffee cup by instinct. One afternoon, Ruthie returned. This time, she brought bread and questions. Clara was out back, tending the herb patch that had stubbornly refused to die. She's not who she said she was, Ruthie muttered as she helped Elijah stack firewood. No, he agreed. Ruthie watched him. You care. I see who she is now. Ruthie narrowed her eyes. And what if the past finds her? Then I'll stand beside her. Ruthie huffed. Foolish man. Brave one, too. That night, Clara found the drawer. Not because she was snooping, but because she was looking for a needle, and the cabin had few hiding places. She opened it and found the ring, silver, worn, small enough for slender fingers. She didn't touch it, just closed the drawer softly and returned to the stove. When Elijah came in later, she said nothing, just handed him his plate, eyes steady, no apology in them, only understanding. He took the plate, but paused before eating. You didn't ask. I don't need to, she said. The fire crackled. Wind brushed past the windows. The rain had come and gone, leaving the world washed and raw. Before sleep, she sat by the hearth, brushing out her hair. Elijah passed by on his way to the bed, then stopped. Clara, he said, voice lower than usual. She turned. I'm not afraid of who you were, or what you had to run from. She nodded once, slowly. I'm just afraid I'll want you to stay, he added, and you won't. Clara stood, crossed the room without hurry, and placed her hand gently on his chest. I'm just afraid I might stay, she whispered, and it won't be enough. Their eyes met in the flicker light. Neither kissed. Neither reached further. But something passed between them, weighty, patient, real. It was the first seed of something not yet love, but deeper than curiosity. A shared truth. They slept that night under the same roof but apart, hearts restless with the beginning of things too fragile to name. Outside, the earth drank in the rain. The land listened. And far beyond, the railroad tracks rusted quietly in the dark. The days warmed gently, coaxing buds from the bare-limbed trees and luring green shoots through frostbitten soil. Elijah's land, once brittle and mournful, breathed a little deeper beneath spring's tentative promise. Birds returned. A fox skirted the edge of the field one morning, tail aflame against dawn. Life stirred again, not with thunder, but with careful grace. Clara rose with the sun now. She swept the porch before breakfast, hung clothes with hands steadier than they'd been weeks ago, and hummed softly, unconsciously. There was a quiet rhythm between her and Elijah, neither spoken nor agreed upon, but steady as a heartbeat. They moved around each other like companions long accustomed, without need for constant words or declarations. She mended his shirts. He repaired the hinges on her trunk. She chopped vegetables. He brought her wildflowers in a chipped cup without comment. But the peace was thin as parchment. She felt it in the way her breath caught each time a rider passed on the far trail, in how she glanced at the horizon more often than the sky, in the way Ruthie Mae's gaze lingered too long when she came by with news from town. It was on one such afternoon that the trouble arrived. Clara was gathering herbs near the shed when she heard Ruthie's voice rise at the front gate, tense, clipped, trying to sound casual. "Elijah, you best come read this." By the time Clara stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, Elijah held a folded sheet of paper, edges creased, the ink already smudged in places from Ruthie's worried fingers. It was a broadsheet, the kind pinned to saloon doors and telegraph posts. Elijah didn't look up, just held it out in silence. Clara took it with slow fingers. The sketch was crude, but unmistakable. Her profile, sharper than she liked to admit, chin high, hair styled in a way she hadn't worn in months, but still hers. Below it, the words, "Wanted. Information on Lady Clara Wexley Monroe. Reward offered. $10,000. Last seen near Sawbone Ridge. Presumed abducted or in hiding." Her breath stopped at the name listed beneath. Everett L. Granger, ESQ. The man she had fled. The man who now claimed to search for her with concern and gold. She folded the sheet neatly, precisely, as if it were a handkerchief and not a threat. "I suppose there's no more pretending," she said. Elijah's eyes were unreadable. Not cold, not warm, just still. "How long have you known?" he asked. Clara's shoulders stiffened, though her voice remained calm. "Since the day you found me. I didn't lie about the danger. Only the name." Ruthie, sensing the quiet rupture, touched Elijah's arm. "I'll leave you two to it." She didn't wait for permission, just stepped down and disappeared into the trees, her boots crackling through brittle leaves. Clara turned to Elijah, the broadsheet still in her hand. "I didn't come here to fool you. I came here to survive. And then..." She hesitated. "Then I stayed." His mouth twitched, not quite bitter. "You stayed because it was safe?" "No. I stayed because you made me feel human again." The silence stretched taut. Elijah set the axe he'd been sharpening onto the table with quiet care. "You should have told me." "I was going to," she whispered. "I didn't know how. Every time I looked at you, I forgot what I was running from. I remembered what it felt like to be seen without a price on my head." He crossed the porch, each step steady but heavy. "I ain't angry because of who you were, or what you left behind." Her heart caught in her chest. "I'm angry," he continued, voice low, "because I let myself want something real. And now I don't know if any of it was." The words landed like gravel on glass. Clara swallowed hard, lifting her chin. "It was real," she said. "The way I look at you is real. The way I breathe easier in this place, the way I learned your silences like verses in a prayer. I didn't fake that." He met her gaze, and something flickered, something wounded but not yet closed. She stepped toward him. "You saved me from more than just those men on the ridge, Elijah." You saved me from disappearing, from becoming only what they named me." He didn't respond. Not with words. Instead, he turned, walked inside, and came back with her trunk. Dropped it gently onto the porch boards beside her. Her hands trembled. "I'm not sending you away," he said. "But you'll have to decide whether you stay as the Baroness or as the woman who washed my floor and made me laugh again." She stared down at the trunk, the very thing she had arrived with, heavy with silks and silver and letters she never finished. The weight of a world she had tried to leave behind. When she looked back up, he was already at the edge of the field, hammering a new rail into the fence. She didn't cry. She packed slowly that evening, folding each dress with care. She left the necklace in the drawer beside his wife's ring. She didn't leave a note. At dawn, she rode away. The mule she borrowed carried her quietly down the trail. No one saw her go. No sound but the soft thud of hooves and the wind threading through the grass. Elijah didn't watch her leave, but he knew the moment the cabin grew quieter than it had in months. Ruthie came by 2 days later, found him splitting wood with the kind of precision that meant a man was trying not to think. "She leave you or save you?" she asked. Elijah didn't look up. "Both." Ruthie placed a small parcel on the table inside, dried apples and fresh soap. "She's not in town," she said. "No one's seen her. But that Granger man is coming. Brought hired guns. Asking about wagons lost near Saltbone." Elijah paused only briefly before returning to his work. "Let them come." Ruthie watched him a moment longer, then left without pressing further. That night, he found the necklace in the drawer, laid atop his wife's old ring. His fingers closed around the locket. He opened it. Inside was a sketch, not the Baroness from the broadsheet, but Clara in a simple dress, hair loose, laughing. The sketch was old, the ink faint, but the eyes were the same woman who had stirred his coffee with quiet hands, the same woman who stood on his porch and offered truth like a final gift. Outside, the night pressed in. He didn't sleep. He sat by the fire with the necklace in his hand, remembering the sound of her voice saying his name without fear. Somewhere in the dark, a horse neighed, a signal of riders near or coyotes prowling. He didn't move. The fire burned low. He whispered into the silence, not a prayer, not a plea. "Come back if you're still mine." No one answered, but the flame did not die. The wind returned first, sharp, dry, and full of warning. It cut across the Emerald Ranch like a blade through linen, bending the grass low and sending the horses into restless pacing. Elijah stood at the edge of the field, hammer paused mid-swing, sensing the shift not in sound, but in his bones. Dust curled on the horizon. Not storm, but riders. 4, maybe 5. Moving with purpose, not aimless like drifters, but methodical. Paid. Sent. He didn't run. He simply set the hammer down, wiped his palms against his trousers, and walked back toward the cabin. He stopped by the barn first, checked the rifle, loaded each chamber slowly. The mule brayed in the distance, nervous but not yet panicked. The chickens scattered into silence. All things knew when something dark approached. Inside, he took the necklace Clara had left behind, looped it once in his fingers. The silver still held her warmth, somehow. He tucked it into the pocket over his heart, then stepped onto the porch. The riders crested the hill minutes later. Men in black coats and stiff hats, faces set like chiseled stone. The one in front bore the bearing of someone used to being obeyed, not questioned. He didn't raise a gun, yet, but his eyes scanned the land like a claim already purchased. "Elijah Carter," he called. Elijah said nothing. The lead rider dismounted, walked forward with slow, certain steps. "I'm here on behalf of Everett L. Granger. We're looking for a woman, Clara Wexley Monroe. She may have come this way." Elijah didn't blink. "Ain't seen her." The man's lips curved just slightly. "We have witnesses, and reason to believe she stayed here." "I said," Elijah repeated, voice calm as still water, "I ain't seen her." The silence that followed was taut as a pulled wire. Then, with a single motion, the man signaled. 2 riders broke off, circling toward the barn. Another headed for the well. The last stayed behind, rifle still slung, but hand close. The leader walked up the porch steps. "You a man of law, Mr. Carr?" "No." "Then you got no cause to shelter a fugitive." Elijah met his eyes. "She's not a fugitive. She's a woman who survived you." The punch came fast, brutal, ringing. Elijah staggered, but didn't fall. Blood touched his lip, bright against the gray of his beard. "I'll ask once more," the man growled, voice clipped with rage. "Is she here?" "No," Elijah said again, wiping his mouth. "But I hope to God she comes back." The leader's eyes narrowed. Behind them, the rider at the barn gave a shout. "She ain't here." "She was," the leader hissed, turning back to Elijah. "She left this." He tossed something to the porch floor, a folded letter, her handwriting unmistakable. It had been opened, creased, crumpled. Likely intercepted before it ever left the outpost. She betrayed her name, her station, but she won't live free. Elijah took a breath, slow and deep. "You're not here for justice. You're here for power." "You're damn right," the man spat. "And I'll burn this place to cinders if she doesn't turn up." The hammering of hooves interrupted him, sudden, fast, from the trail behind a ridge. All 5 men turned. Clara rode like fire, hatless, her hair wild in the wind, her coat flaring behind her like wings. She didn't ride a lady's horse, but a sturdy ranch gelding, borrowed or stolen. She rode like someone who'd stopped being afraid. She pulled up at the base of the porch, eyes blazing. "I'm right here." The leader blinked. "You should have run." "I did," she said. "And now I'm done." Elijah stepped off the porch to stand beside her. "You're outnumbered," the man sneered. "You think love's enough to stop bullets." "No," she said. "But truth is." "And fire." She lifted the rifle she'd carried slung across her back, Elijah's, borrowed without asking. The men flinched, but she didn't aim. "Not yet." "I know your kind," she said, voice sharp as flint. "You hide behind paper and men you pay to shoot. But you never fight your own battles. You send others to kill your mistakes." The leader spat. "You're nothing but a runaway wife." "I was never your wife," she snapped. "And I'm no one's property." He raised his pistol. Clara fired first. The crack shattered the stillness. The bullet hit his arm. Clean, brutal. He screamed, dropped the weapon, staggered back. Elijah moved before the others could react, tackling the nearest man, wrenching the rifle free. A shot rang out wild. The chickens shrieked. One of the riders bolted, panicked, galloping off toward the creek. Clara fired again, not to kill, but to scatter. Within moments, the clearing was empty, but for 2 men, one bleeding, gasping curses through clenched teeth, and Elijah, who stood calm with the rifle still trained. Clara stepped forward, face pale but steady. "Go back to Granger," she said. "Tell him I'm not running anymore. Tell him if he sends another man, I'll send him back in pieces." The leader snarled, but his fight had bled out with his pride. They let him mount with one good arm and ride off into the trembling horizon. Silence returned, slow and unbelieving. Clara turned to Elijah. Her breath hitched once, but she didn't fall. "I came back because I couldn't breathe out there," she said, voice raw. "Not without you. Not without this place." Elijah looked at her, really looked. Mud on her hem, smoke on her skin, eyes full of tears she hadn't shed. And all he saw was home. "I was afraid," he said softly, "that if you came back it wouldn't be the same." "It's not," she whispered. "It's better." She dropped the rifle. He caught her as she stepped into him, arms wrapped around arms, forehead to shoulder, their breathing tangled like roots in warm earth. They didn't speak of love. They didn't have to. That night they sat together on the porch, wrapped in one quilt, her hand in his. The stars shone without shame. The wind had calmed. The field slept peacefully, bruises fading. Elijah pressed a kiss to her temple. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not because I need you, but because I see you. And I think we've both earned something good." She turned, eyes wet. "I stayed the moment I rode back." The night deepened. The lantern flickered beside them, casting long golden shapes across the porch floor. Inside the cabin, the necklace rested on the mantel, beside his wife's ring. Two stories, side by side. Not replacing, but becoming something new. Outside, the land healed. And somewhere, beyond the reach of the law and the ruin it carried, love bloomed beneath dust and blood and spring's reluctant thaw. Where the heart knows home, it does not forget. It waits. And when it finds what it was waiting for, it roots deep. It stays. If this story moved you, please let me know. Where are you listening from? I'd love to hear that, and also like, comment, and subscribe.